Hello and welcome back. My name is Greg and I'm an educational advocate with Mote. And what I'd like to share with you in this video is how we can start to use Mote to increase accessibility for students by leveraging audio with Google Slides. So class discussions are a really typical component of most classroom environments, but for a number of different reasons, these environments can be challenging for students to engage with. And that's what I'd like to explore today, is how might we be able to use Mote in Google Slides to extend the classroom discussion with audio. And the critical question, the one above me here, is how can we make these classroom discussions more accessible to all learners by creating these self-paced or asynchronous audio discussion environments that really allow us to extend the environment for this discussion beyond the physical walls of the classroom. So as a classroom teacher, I experienced many times when I was facilitating classroom discussions, it was challenging to get all of the learners involved. So some students, for different reasons, they might be uncomfortable sharing their thoughts out loud in front of the class. Some students might need more time to process ideas or might simply feel uncomfortable jumping into a live class discussion. So that's where Mote and Google Slides and audio is a perfect fit for this type of challenge or obstacle that you and your students might be facing. So what we'll do in this video is explore a number of different templates that you can leverage in Google Slides to create various types of discussions with audio and Mote to make this process more accessible to all students, to give them time to hear ideas from their peers that they might want to play back and listen back to really grasp the idea, or to also give them time to carefully compose their own idea and then share that with audio with their peers. Also, by leveraging Mote with audio, we make this process more accessible because we're removing the barrier of text or typing that can be an obstacle for many students when they're engaged in discussions. So we can start to shift away from or build this in addition to a traditional text discussion forum and create more of a flowing audio environment. So with that as the backdrop, let's get started and explore the first concept. So let's talk about a whole class discussion, one that you might facilitate often in your classroom where you have every student hopefully engaged in this process. But what would this look like in a self-paced or asynchronous environment if we extended outside of the classroom with Mote? So here's a template that we can explore. So notice we have a few directions in the top left where, students would record using the Mote Google Chrome extension in Google Slides to add their audio. What you might want to do in this template is you could start with the audio prompt right in the center of the environment if you would like to, and then have students reply to that. You might even identify who the first round of student repliers might be and that kind of primary inside circle, and then identify which students will follow up to those discussions. Or you could simply open it up and say, hey, find an open white spot, and that might be like a primary audio file, that first round of entry or reply to you on that first ring. Or if there's only the outside ring left, students could reply there as well. Now, because this is built in Google Slides, you'll have the ability to make a copy of this template and then modify it and use it in your classroom. Let's take a look at the next idea here, small group discussions. So it might be a better experience to have students engaged in smaller subgroups so you can have more targeted discussions. Maybe you scaffold the discussion and provide different prompts for different groups, or you just want them to engage and make maybe a smaller 4 or 5 student kind of experience. Let's take a look at 2 different templates you could use. Here we have one all on one slide where group 1 and 2 and 3 would all be replying in one environment. And in this case, they can see and listen to each other's audio discussion. As a modification of this, you might want to do something like this instead. So here's one slide that you could assign out to one group. If you're using a learning management system, maybe something like Google Classroom, you can make a copy of this slide, one copy for each group, and then simply have them use the Google Chrome extension for Mote and add their audio to have this self-paced discussion that it could expand outside of class. What you could absolutely even do as the lead learner in the class is add your own audio files, maybe in the first 2 primary circles outside of the starting point, or you might add the starting audio prompt in the top circle and then have students reply and expand from there. So we've looked at whole class, we've looked at small group. Let's continue on to look at another approach to making discussions more accessible with audio. Let's talk about a linear and threaded discussion, one where the points are simply building off of one another and then students can reply to each other. This would be very similar to a traditional text discussion forum, but let's simply rebuild it in Google Slides and make it more accessible with audio. So as you can see here, the teacher might be the one to add the first audio prompt in the top left circle, and then a student might listen to that and reply in the second main circle. But then we have these two bubbles that pop off, and those might be replies to the original post. So we have a linear discussion that's moving in those larger circles, and then it wraps around to the bottom there. But then those little offshoot bubbles are ones where students might listen to their peer and compose a reply, a rebuttal. Maybe they'd point out the strength of that argument or a question that they have about that argument or audio that was presented. So again, because this is in Google Slides, you could make a copy of this slide in the template and then turn that into an assignment to have a threaded audio discussion for your class. Let's continue and explore the idea of this linear viewpoints or spectrums. In this model, and let's jump right to it, you might have one idea with two different sides of this argument that you're presenting. So as a former history teacher, I might think about a polarizing concept and have students make an argument on either side of this. What they can do here is, again, use the Mote Chrome extension, record their audio file, and then drag that audio file on where they think they fall on this spectrum of this one polarizing or these two different ideas in which side maybe they agree or disagree with. And then you'll end up with a lot of audio files kind of in order. The nice thing about building this kind of like linear discussion concept where they're mapping their ideas is they can listen to their peers and see where their idea falls on this and where they might have to place it on this linear spectrum. So really helpful, this model, when you're comparing one or two ideas or looking for agreement or understanding, or again, using a polarizing concept and seeing where students fall on this spectrum. Now we'll move to one more idea. I like to call this one a plotted viewpoint discussion or a quadrant discussion. It ups the level of complexity a little bit for students understanding how to engage with it. This could be really helpful in a high school environment. And let me show you what I mean. With this model, we're actually having students compare two ideas and then plot their response with audio. So notice on that horizontal spectrum, we have idea one, the left spectrum and the right spectrum. And then on the vertical measure, we have idea two, the kind of top spectrum and the bottom spectrum. So one way to use something like this might be when you're reading a text or a novel or exploring a concept with your students where there was an event that took place. And we might plot, was on the top spectrum, was the event bound to happen or could the event have been avoided? And then on the horizontal spectrum, we might plot responsibility. Was one individual or group responsible or was another group or individual responsible? So depending on where students fall when they compare these two ideas, they might say, this event in the story was bound to happen, and here's the group or individual that's responsible, so they might be in the top right quadrant. Another student might say, this event could have absolutely been avoided, but here's the group that could have helped avoid it, and this is what could have taken place, or this is the events in the historical event or in the story that play out that way. So when doing this comparison of two ideas, it's really interesting to see where student ideas fall on this. To give another example of this, in a history class, you might do something like with the American Revolution. Was it bound to happen or was it avoidable in some capacity? And then on the right and left, the horizontal, was it ultimately caused by the British or was it ultimately caused by the colonists? And then students can use evidence to kind of create their argument or their perspective, and then they would plot their idea by dragging their Mote audio file into one of these four quadrants. So I hope this has been helpful and it's helping you develop a vision and an understanding how we can make classroom discussions more accessible to students using Mote with high quality frameworks and high quality templates with audio. So good luck integrating these ideas in your classroom and making your classroom discussions more accessible to your students by expanding them outside of the walls of the classroom with the Mote Google Chrome extension for Google Slides.